Hi, and welcome back to Ron Hasn't Seen. This is a channel where I go back and watch movies I should have watched the first time ago and review them after my first watch. Today we're traveling back to 1981 and the cult sci-fi action classic Escape from New York. It was directed by John Carpenter, written by Carpenter and Nick Castle, famous for playing the Shape or Michael Myers in Halloween, and starring Kurt Russell. The movie takes place in the far-off future of 1997 or 1998, where Manhattan has become the nation's only top security prison. Basically, the city's surrounded by a giant wall. Russell plays Snake Plissken. He's an ex-Special Forces soldier, kind of famous and a hero, but he's turned into kind of an anarchist criminal because the government's obviously gotten a little fascist if they've turned New York into a prison. The night he's getting transferred into the prison, another terrorist group crashes Air Force One into Manhattan, and the president is captured by a crime lord known as the Duke. After the government's initial rescue plans fail because they threaten to kill the president, Pliskin is sent in exchange for a presidential pardon and get the bombs they just injected into his neck out. Once on the island, Pliskin encounters different groups, people in the underground, and then he uses one of his old contacts, now known as the Brain. The Brain used to be one of Snake's co-criminals. He got sent to prison, and now he's working for the Duke, making gas in exchange for being kind of high up in the organization. Snake gets to the president, but he's captured, and the Duke makes him fight in some sort of gladiatorial combat. While that's going on, the Brain and his girlfriend rescue the president, and we find out that there's some tape that goes along with this whole conference the president's supposed to go to end war with Russia and China. After Snake defeats the champion in combat, he goes to rescue the Brain and the president from the rooftop. They start escaping over one of the bridges. The Duke's following. The Brain and the girl are killed. Snake gets the president to the wall. The Duke and Snake are fighting when the president grabs one of the guards' guns. The president is then back. He's about to make a speech with the peace offering to Russia and China when he finds out Snake switched the tape for whatever was in the car that they were trying to escape. And that's kind of the end of the movie. The film was conceived in 1976 in kind of response to, the way the government was looked at after Watergate, but no one would make it. But after Carpenter's success with Halloween, he got the budget to make it for about $6 million. Interviewed a lot of actors, but Kurt Russell just seemed to be young enough without the experience to be right for the part and not kind of fight with Carpenter and trying to take over the film was kind of Carpenter's thinking there. One of the biggest challenges was where to film the movie on still a pretty tight budget and have this kind of bombed out New York. Obviously, they couldn't shoot in New York. Backlot would be too expensive. So they filmed in East St. Louis, which had kind of been burnt out in a 1976 fire and never really fully repaired. Actually, about the same time in East St. Louis, this is about it. My father-in-law was living there and was shot at a Jack-in-the-Box. Went back and sewed his own hand up because he was a med student. Yeah, that's an anecdote. The film does have a 1996 sequel, Escape from LA, which is something I did see in theaters a long time ago. And I didn't really love it. I thought it was kind of cheesy and not that great. But this, I was expecting something a little bit more because it's a cult classic. But I was expecting more of an 80s action film when it's more of a 70s action film. It has more in common with something like The French Connection in its pacing and its action scenes than it does with something like a Schwarzenegger or Stallone movie that we're going to start getting here in the 80s. I mean, I guess it kind of could fit more into Die Hard with slow, methodical action, but it was a little slower. The editing felt more 70s and 80s, and it was 81, so I should have been expecting something more like that. but it was good. I enjoyed it. Russell and the supporting cast, which includes Ernest Borgnine, Isaac Hayes, Harry Dean Stanton, and Donald Pleasance, all do a great job with the script that really chews the scenery and is so much more over the top than even they are. And the world that this movie created was really cool and really interesting, but I don't think we got enough of it. I think the film's runtime could have been padded a little bit more to flesh out the scope of the world and still been interesting. I think you could have had some set pieces, some exposition that filled things in and still been interesting, because the world itself was interesting enough that those conversations could work. Like, we know there's a world war, but we don't really know what's happening and what the president plans to do with this fusion technology. It's kind of all implied rather than said, and I think just fleshing all these things out would have made a more of a whole movie. And even like the factions in New York, you have the Duke and these underground dwellers and just random people. Like, we don't get the hierarchy, like who these underground, we don't get too much of that, and I think that hurt the film. And like I said, I was expecting more action, like when Pliskin's escaping these underground dwellers coming out to get food. I kind of expected more of a, I don't know, like Terminator style, just shooting everybody instead of just a run and escape in a car kind of thing. It's not what I expected. I mean, Snake is such an iconic character. I grew up with thinking of him like Rambo or, you know, any of Arnold's characters like John McClane. He was that raised to that level, but he's more of a Boba Fett character where you see he's just cool looking and has a presence, but, you know, is not the best on screen. He does fight the one dude, but he's losing to the Duke until the president shoots him. I mean, there's a time limit there with a thing in his neck, but his reputation for badassery is more of, yeah, he's cool, you know, the all black, the eye patch, you know, walking around with like an Uzi turned into an assault rifle or whatever it was. And, you know, that's kind of where I'm going to leave this movie. Like, it's good, but you have to realize what you're getting. You're getting that transition into these 80s over-the-top action. This is oddly more grounded than a lot of what I expect out of, like, Commando and Predator and things like that would be coming in the near future. So just think about that when you go into this movie. But otherwise, it's a good movie, and I recommend it. Well, next week is going to be Thanksgiving. So this one I'm incredibly embarrassed I haven't seen, because it stars two absolute legends with John Candy and Steve Martin, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yeah, just never saw it. So that's coming up next week for Thanksgiving. Thank you guys for watching this episode of Ron Hasn't Seen. Please like and subscribe below if you like what I'm doing here, and I will see you next week. Thank you.